the nature of your engagement really with the presentness, for want of a better word, of the past that has informed all your work over the last quarter century or so, seems to me to offer to many of us hopes that it'll be possible now for historians of modern and medieval India to in some way collaborate with historians and archaeologists and do something together where one looks at questions like environmental damage, ecology, cohabitation through times between people and nature and relics, along with changes in historiography in a much larger sense. A few words of observation on these possibilities. And finally, do you have any suggestions for new projects that others could take up along these lines? I've asked too many questions. Choose to answer the ones you want to.
Okay, so I'll begin with your second question first, which is about, the contemporary relevance of and the presentness of the past, in a manner of speaking. I think this is something which is there in what surrounds us in all kinds of ways. So I teach a course in Ashoka University on Indian civilizations. And clearly, when you talk about important moments in the past, you draw attention, for example, to Kalidas. And when you talk of Kalidas, you will talk about Meghadoot. And you can easily make the connection with modern India, because if you think of a Rabindranath Tagore and his engagement with Meghadoot and what he does, both with Geeta Govinda and with Meghadoot, you get a feeling that, this idea of the past being present in the countryside, in living antiquarianism, as I said, the past being present there is also present in the minds of some of the greats that form a part of modern India. Tagore to me is a good example of that. Or you think of a Gandhi and Bhagavad Gita, yeah, and what he does with the Bhagavad Gita is completely different from the way ancient Indians thought of it, or even scholars of ancient India think, of the Bhagavad Gita. You think of the British who ruled us. Look at all the elements in their architecture where, the past is being invoked. No Indians bought into that. So when, for example, what we call today New Delhi was built, and if you read the works and the file material and the publications on how was then the Viceregal House, but the present Rashtrapati Bhavan was aligned. It was very deliberately aligned on the one hand with Purana Killa, which was an ancient capital, and on the other hand, it was aligned with the Jama Masjid, with Shah Jahanabad, which represented medieval. So the British are trying to see themselves in terms of that continuum. That's what they are putting out in the public domain. So the past is not dead for them. The past has all kinds of uses. Or you think of a Nehru and his engagement with Buddhism, and the way in which he put in elements of Ashoka into our national symbols. If you think about the Sarnath pillar is very much a Buddhist symbol, but he makes it much larger, he makes it much more inclusive. He talks about the chakra being a part of, a long period of time in other religions. And then you have Vasudev Sharan Agrawal, a historian who comes and produces a book which actually tries to put this argument into a historical form.
Ah,
Second, thing about what is it that I'm working on? I'm actually working very far away from the Indus great cities or from the great Emperor Ashok. At some point in my middle age, I have realized that there is one very large part of India which was much larger than cities and great kings and their capitals, is represented by the forest and wilderness. There were many more forests in ancient India. The land would have been much more forested with islands of tillage, in a manner of speaking. And I haven't ever researched that. So I did then approach the Madhya Pradesh Forest Department. I was also a bit nervous, having never done this. And eventually they gave me permission to work in the Bandhavgarh uh, National Park and Tiger Reserve. And that's where I have been working for the last 3 years in order to see what is it, how do you bring the forests into the narrative? Who are the people who use the forest? How does it change, let's say, from the prehistoric to the modern, as a manner of speaking, when it becomes a reserve park and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm working on currently. And my advice to people who, the younger generation, would be that, look, we really need to pay much more attention to forested areas. These are areas which have a great deal of the material past, and it's preserved very well. I mean, this also has public policy implications. I've done field work in, say, Ballabgarh, where sites disappear at an alarming rate. But on the other hand, I've also worked in a forest where things are much better preserved. So, what does this tell us about the landscape, being preserved along with the monuments? Should only monuments and sites be preserved? Or if you preserve larger landscapes, things will survive much better?